giving you a voice.
Making it loud our own way.
Welcome to the fun.
We need your help to keep fun loud, live, and independent. For just $1, you can be our boss at patreon.com/funfrc. Pledge your support in September and you'll be eligible to win a Cooler Master MS-120 keyboard and mouse set.
So PJ, the Coco out of reffing, as I like to call him, he's gonna do our first match. We're gonna go way back to 2013. This is like my favorite FRC game, Ultimate Ascent. And PJ is going to fill you all in on what you need to know, and he's going to talk a lot about the defensive strategies that we're seeing in Curie quarterfinal for match number 2. And there's a lot of history in that division. It was kind of a poop show. So PJ, take it away.
Yeah. So for a little bit of backstory, 2013 was, the Frisbee game. A lot of people, just like Karthik mentioned, talk about it as one of the best games in FRC ever. I personally don't agree, but that's a topic for another day. Frisbees were scored in goals on either side of the field. There were 2 big pyramids that robots could climb on for big points. Some of the key points for the video that we're going to be discussing and the match we're going to be analyzing: Frisbees in the high goal were either 2 points for the side goals or 3 points for the middle goal. Climbs were 10, 20, and 30 points, depending on how high you got on the pyramid. Importantly, fouls were 3 points and tech fouls were 20 points. So, the equivalent of 6.5 Frisbees in the high goal was a tech foul. And the most important rule, and why this is so impressive, is G30. Regardless of who initiates the contact, a robot may not contact an opponent robot contacting its pyramid. And if this was purposeful, if you were playing defense, that was a tech foul. As with most years, strategy was huge in Ultimate Ascent. Robots generally fell into one of 4-ish categories, maybe 5, depending on how you count it. But I always broke it down as full court shooters. You had your cyclers, which were the teams that ran back and forth from the feeder station. You had climbers, which some teams focused only on climbing. And you had defense. And of course, you had your teams that fit into all or some of those categories. But for the most part, it kind of broke down into those 4. One of those defense spots, 48-14, a rookie that year known as the United Robotics Team of London, now known as We Mars Incubator, out of London, Ontario, Canada, ended up in the very unlikely position as 3rd seed on Curie. Now, many know that field for being where 1678 began their Einstein streak that continues to this day. And this is kind of what Karthik was referring to. This was one of the most popular examples people go to of a scorched earth pick strategy, meaning the number 1 seed asks everybody else. They know they're going to decline, so this breaks up all the other powerhouse teams. This left 48-14 up the proverbial creek with nobody in the top 8 able to accept their invitation. Their situation looked a bit bleak as first as a largely defensive captain, and to top it all off, this was their 2nd ever event. They'd never been in a picking position before, having earned their way to champs with a Rookie All-Star Award and as the 3rd robot of a 2056 11-14 pair-up at Greater Toronto West. They picked 67 in 1918, making a unique alliance with 2 30-point climbers. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked, and they were one of only 2 alliances that had 2 30-point climbers, the other one being the 1538-1986 217 alliance.
Yeah, and they were the only alliance with 2 working.
Yeah. Yeah, 217 could climb, but I believe this alliance was the only one that successfully had 2 robots climb to level 3 in a match during elims.
Yeah, at champs.
At champs, yes. Hot, while not the dominant robot they had been, was still very capable 4-court shooter and had one of the better climbs in the world, I would say. Not the fastest, but it was pretty dang good, pretty dang consistent. 1918 was largely a cycler, but wasn't anything to write home about. So 48-14 had to get creative if they were going to make it out of quarters. They were not, I would say, as somebody who watched this division, they were not the favorite to make it out of quarters. Even though they were the 3rd seed, they were up against 1717, who we have talked about time and time again. I know FUNalysis has done a few episodes with 1717 being featured. And so 1717 and then 234, another Cyber Blue out of Indiana, was another very capable cycler. So number 3 was not the favorite to move out of this division by any means. Most people thought they were going to get knocked out twice, and then that leads us to quarterfinal 4 match 2. So we're gonna start. So if Tyler, if you can have the match start to run for me. And so we start in auto, pretty standard. We have the teams shooting frisbees to earn goals. And at the end of auto, we have a score of 42 red, 66 blue. 48-14 immediately hops on 17-17. Once
PJ, which
Teleop
robot's 48-14?
Okay, sorry. Yes, thank you. They started out there in the red robot near the top of the screen. Yes, thank you. So that's 48-14 right there. So if we go ahead and roll with Teleop, let's see. As always, 17-17 has a really beautiful swerve drive. You'll see them start to go around. A lot of people consider them almost undefendable. And you watch 48-14 just start here and start to shut them down. So they stick to them. They go to the loading zone. 17-17 is setting up to full court shoot, which, shoot across the entire field. And then 48-14 comes up. And in just a couple seconds, they're going to come and they actually set up to block 17-17. My time is off. But if you go ahead and pause it with about 100 seconds, if we go back there, you'll see 48-14 puts up a blocker, which Karthik was mentioning before the show, was not initially designed as a blocker. And they raise it up, and 17-17, they block a couple of those shots, and 17-17 quickly realizes they are not going to get anywhere with that. So they have to adapt. But I think, Karthik, you were saying that blocker was not originally designed as one?
Yeah, that was a climb. That was actually a 30-point climber that 48-14 used that us in 2056 convinced them to turn into a blocker when we played with them at GTR West.
Yeah. So as the match runs, you see 48-14 sticking by them. And then if I can get, and Hot sets up down in the corner to full court shoot while 48-14 continues to play defense on 17-17. So as we roll the match, we see 17-17 set up in what's supposed to be a safe zone. And now here, if we pause right here, you'll see this is where it gets real dangerous. It is one of my favorite things I've seen is 48-14 lines up underneath the opponent's pyramid. As I mentioned, if they touch 17-17 while 17-17 is touching that pyramid, it's a tech foul. And that is the equivalent of 6.5 Frisbees, which 48-14 is not scoring. They cannot make up those numbers. So they set up there, and 17-17 always, when they lined up to shoot like that, they were always touching the pyramid because they had little flag thingies that would help defend them. So 48-14 does a ballsy move and sets up here underneath the pyramid. Go ahead and let it run.
Yeah, okay. And what was really crazy about this is when teams were designing their robots in 2013, everyone wanted to have that kind of unblockable shot. But when factoring in the unblockable shot, we weren't thinking about a robot under the pyramid that was expanding to height. We were thinking of robots behind the pyramid that were expanding to height. Mm-hmm. And so 48-14 really unlocks some secret sauce here. It's risky, but it's almost all the low shooting robots are going to be blocked by a robot like 48-14 who's going to be playing from that position.
Yeah, I feel like if there was ever a robot doing that to us, we would have just tried to run into them and push them back against the pyramid. So they have to be on their game and ready to drop that elevator down.
Yeah. And you can see them a little bit, 48-14 is ready to go. 17-17 kind of creeps up on them. They back up to match. It's very intelligent drivers for a rookie robot, like beyond intelligent drivers. I know they had a veteran drive coach. Their drive coach that year was a 6'10 alum, or I believe Karthik said.
Yep.
Yeah. So their drive coach was a 6'10 alum. So, obviously a very seasoned team. So that helps them out. And then as we continue to watch this match, like from 48-14, like 17-17 does not score a Frisbee this match after auto, like spoiler alert for the rest of the match. But 48-14 prevents 17-17 from scoring any teleop Frisbees. And 17-17 was not a slouch.
Well, 17-17 was probably a 4 to 5 cycle a match robot that year.
Yeah, for sure. And they were like I said, they were no slouch. They won 2 regionals. They came in as a 2 regional winner, and this little rookie out of London, Ontario, just for lack of a better term, made them their bitch. And I try to think of a more PG way to say it. Like you watch the match and they prevent 17-17 from scoring any teleop Frisbees. And that's unheard of. And while this is doing it, so while they're doing all this, 67 just keeps full court shooting. While while 48-14 has the best offensive robot on the Blue Alliance out of commission, 67 just keeps shooting those frisbees across the entire field. Like, as you can see them just going across and across. They end up making 25 shots, which is 75 points. And then 1918 during this match is doing what is very undervalued in modern FRC, but they're playing counter defense. So they're preventing 135 from blocking 67's full court shots. So they spend the entire match basically just pushing robots out of the way so 67 has free range to shoot wherever they do, which is crazy when you break it down. And 67 after auto, 67 is the only robot that scored frisbees for that alliance. This was still back in the day where your standard build or your standard alliance build was you had 2 offense and 1 defense. That was just how you built an alliance back in the day. And this was an alliance of 2 defense robots, 1 not even playing defense, 1 defense robot, 1 counter defense robot, and a full court shooter.
Now, to be fair, though, that wasn't too unusual in the 2013 game when you had a full court shooter on your alliance, because the full court shooter could empty that station.
Hot was such a good full court shooter when they were on that year. I mean, it took them very late in the season to get to that point, but once they dialed it in, it was unreal.
Yeah. And like
with those great full court shooters that year, like I'm thinking like 2169, 148, you would basically prioritize. I'm going to make sure that they're protected and they can empty that station, and we're just going to let them do their own thing.
Yeah. And then as with any match, a bit of luck comes into play as well, because 135 died for about 25 to 30 seconds in that match, which is huge. Or it should have been huge because it would have freed up 1918 to go play defense on 234. But 1918 doesn't do that. They just kind of drive around and don't do much for those 25 to 30 seconds. But they, still that they didn't have to worry about pushing this robot around. And then at about 65 seconds, we back up there. This might contribute to the 1717 not scoring a frisbee. I think you see an upside down frisbee go into the Penguineers robot, which for people who don't know that year, or people who don't know, an upside down frisbee and a right side up frisbee, they're very different to deal with inside of a robot, and they also fly differently if you shoot it out of the robot. So a lot of teams, once they got an upside down frisbee in them, were done for the match. There's a rare few teams who could either eject it or could still manage to shoot an upside down frisbee, but for the most part, an upside down frisbee, you're done. I can't confirm that's what happened, but as I watch it, that's what it seemed. You can sort of see a frisbee bounce as it goes in, and I think it goes in upside down. So that might contribute to that as well. So I'm not, we got to give 48-14 a lot of credit, but, we got to point out that may have had some luck going in their favor. And then, as we continue to go, 28. So, and then at the end, this double climber strategy we're about to get into in this match comes into play, where Hot climbs up for the 30 points. You can see them climbing up there. And 1918 is picking up some colored frisbees, which we were able to score on the top of the pyramid for bonus points. And they go to set up for the 30-point climb, but they don't leave themselves quite enough time. They weren't the fastest 30-point in the world. They were consistent but slow. And so as they climb, match ends in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we end up with a 30-point climb from Hot with some extra discs scored on top. A 10-point climb from 1918 down there on the lower rung. And then over on Blue, we end up with 2 10-point climbs from 1717 and 234. So when you finally, you get the breakdown and everything, Blue led for most of that match. They led coming out of auto, and then 234 did 5 cycles, scoring 19 discs for 57 points. So the score before Endgame was 123 Blue, 117 Red. But then 67's 30-point plus 3 pyramid goals for 15 points, 1918's 10 points, beat out 1717 and 234's combined 20 points for the 172-143 Red win. So what's important to take away from this match, one of the things I noticed is there's different ways of playing defense. I'm going to use some sports terms for those out there in robot world. 48-14's playing what we in the sports world, they were playing a man-to-man defense, right? They stuck on 1717. 1717 was their guy. They shut him down. In this year, that was really good. In other years, you see what's more of a zone type defense, which was more common this year, where different robots would be guarding different parts of the field. So this I chose as an example of just a really good example of what a man-to-man defense, like you stick your robot on their robot and like that's what they do all match. Doesn't work every time, but when it's executed this way, especially like the way they execute against one of the best swerve drives in the world, if not the best swerve drive in the world, is just crazy to me. So that's like sort of what I take away from this match.
I mean, there's so much value in being able to play defense in a way that nobody expects. People play this game all season. They learn where people are going to attack them, where they're going to play defense. A lot of times this game came down to race to the pyramid. If you can get to the pyramid, someone's going to try to block you on your way there. But as soon as you're touching it, you're safe. You have time to think about it, realign, take your shots. And then coming out with this unique defense, I'm sure through 17-17 off of their game so much that it just, even when they were undefended, they were still shaken by that, looking out for something new that they weren't used to.
Yeah. So
I think what was really cool about this is that 48-14, like a lot of the times we talk about teams who, when the build season's over, like how do you upgrade your robot? And this was a classic example of a team coming into a competition and realizing that their primary strategy just wasn't going to work with a 30-point climb, and just perfectly adapting to the situation and coming out with something that turns out to be really successful. It's like, I can't think of a better example of a team who's failed on their initial objective, but then creates secondary objectives out of it so masterfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Then looks like I do have a couple questions in chat, or at least I saw one. Okay, so we have one that just popped up in class chat that I see from Bob Zinkoff. It says 17-17 has swerve, and 48-18 looked to have a tank drive. Why didn't 17-17 just drive left, right, where 48-14 couldn't get to them as fast? You watched the match, and that they tried. They definitely tried, and 48-14 just stuck on them and didn't give them paths where they could. It helped that there was big pyramids in the way, so they couldn't like swerve around 48-14. 48-14 very much utilized the lanes that were going on between the pyramids and in between that to sort of prevent swerve from being fully utilized. Another question, coming from Larry SZ92. Why are you talking about 2013? Because these are strategies, as we're going to go in these other matches that we do from 2011 and 2014. These are things that still apply. The field this year was sort of similar to 2013 in that there was choke points where teams weren't able to. If you had swerve, it was great in ways, but there was choke points where you wouldn't be able to stop them. So just the difference between things like man-to-man defense, zone defense, different ways of playing defense, and different ways of building alliances, is sort of it's
so nice to go back in time and look at some of these old matchups too. I'm just reliving the glory days watching these 2013 gameplay. I mean, it's such a good game, but it's so unique in the way that it played out. I think there's so much to learn, as people try to pick out what they want to design for Deep Space next year, they're going to have to go back to old games and know a little about what worked and what didn't. So us having the chance to break it down and maybe pass on some of the old knowledge to the new young crowd is, I think, a nice service we're giving to the community.
Well, yeah, and there's kind of a theme with the three matches that we're talking about today. It's just that defensive strategies kind of flow from year to year. It's the same principles. I'm going to talk about, positional defense versus pushing defense. PJ showed an example of a team that uniquely utilized robot features towards defense. The robot on robot defense, all these sorts of things apply and can be used game after game. And the teams out there who are able to pull strategies from the past are going to be at a huge sort of advantage. That's one of the reasons when people talk about the success of veteran teams, a lot of that is the institutional knowledge passed down from year to year, where they just kind of know what works and they understand how cycles work and that sort of thing. So it's always kind of good to look at the past. Another question for you there, PJ, is could 17-17 shoot from anywhere on the field?
Yes, anywhere that there wasn't a pyramid in the way, so like nobody could shoot from there, but they could full court. They could shoot from under the pyramid. You see them lining up in the center of the pyramid at one point. they can shoot from, either side of the pyramid. They could, with the swerve and with their angles, they were able to shoot from near everywhere on the field.
All right,
yeah, go on.
Go for it, Karthik.
I was just saying, I was assuming that they probably would have had presets for under the pyramid and for full court. They probably didn't have a mid-court shot because rarely would you be shooting in that open space there. People like to shoot from protective zones, but they definitely could have if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Got another question here for you guys from Letaparth610. Is 2013 one of the best games for robot design versatility?
Yes. I mean, I get giddy thinking about the 2013 game because there were so many different types of robots. You had the floor pickup robots, you had your standard cyclers, you had the full court shooters, you had the 30-point climbs, you had combinations of these things. And so different alliances really felt like chess matches where you're assembling your different sorts of things. And it's kind of like in the NFL where like you could, you whip out a set where you go single back and 3 wide receivers, or you go double tight ends, or you go full house backfield. All these different combinations played out in Ultimate Ascent, and it made for a really cool game. I don't think anyone can say that one was any better than the other. And
I played in tournaments that year where full court climber went to #1 seed and was playing, not full court climber, sorry, triple climber, top level climber, went to the finals just based on their ability to get up to the top and score those 30 points. Full court shooters always being tall and not being able to go under the pyramid. Picking up from the ground was so difficult that most people who did it couldn't get anything from the feeder station. So all of these design trade-offs that you had to make this year that nobody in the entire country, not 11-14, not 254, could do all the tasks in the game. And I think to me, that was such an amazing aspect. Nobody was full court shooting and climbing to the top and picking Frisbees up off the ground and taking them from the feeder station and able to go into the pyramid. So you had to pick some subset of that, of what you wanted your robot to do. I don't know that we get games like that very often.
Yeah, and I think you look at like the 4 Einstein alliances, because that's back when there were still 4 divisions on Einstein. And each one was built differently. Like the one that won that year was 3 cyclers, which nobody thought was going to work. They're like, you need a full court shooter if you're going to win Einstein. And
I wouldn't say that nobody thought that.
I'm sorry. I should say nobody. I'm being superfluous. But
yeah, I mean, as it turned out at the end, 3 cyclers could drain the feeder stations, and then they could take their closer shots with a higher accuracy percentage versus full court shooters like Hot that we just saw that can drain the feeder station as well, but they have a lower accuracy. So those 3 cyclers ended up being super competitive at the end of the day.
Thank you to all of our co-executive producers, keeping fun loud, live, and independent. Pledge your support. Go to patreon.com/funfrc.